XL ruler by Creative Grids designed by Gudrun Erla. This is an amazing tool to help you cut accurate strips, squares, and rectangles so that you can have crisper, more precise piecing throughout your entire quilting process. My name is Holly, Knight of String and Story, and it's my job to guide you to quilt with confidence, and I'm so excited to give you this tour today of the Stripology XL. Let's get started. Now, as I mentioned, this Stripology ruler is an amazing tool to make cutting quilts like Lanterns of Hope, like Polaris, like any number of other patterns infinitely easier. If you've got a pattern that has a lot of repeat strips, squares, or rectangles, then the Stripology XL ruler is going to make it an absolute breeze to take your yardage and turn it into the pieces that you need so that they're cut accurately and so that you can start piecing faster. All right, now let's take a quick tour of the Stripology XL ruler together. As you can see, it is in fact quite large. It is always recommended that you lift the Stripology by both sides and that you store it flat. It also has this handy dandy little hook up at the top so that you can hang your Stripology ruler on a hook or a push pin if that's easier than trying to find a safe place to store it lying down. All right. We do, of course, have the Stripology ruler available at the String and Story shop. You can find that link down in the caption of this video. Now, other fun features you're going to want to make sure to check out about this ruler. Now, as the name Stripology suggests, it's designed for cutting strips of fabric, and it does that by literally having little slats that you can cut your rotary cutter into in order to cut lots of times without having to move either the ruler or the fabric. That's part of how it is more accurate with how it helps you with your cuts, because every time you're moving things around, you run the risk of things wiggling, getting off square, shifting slightly, and thus not being quite the same size. All right, down here at the bottom, you'll see that we have all the numbers lined up. These are 1/2 inch increments, and there's this very handy dandy little feature where every 1.5 inches is marked by a star. All right, and every 2.5 inches is marked by a square, starting at 0 and going all the way across to 20. Down this side, you will see that there are dotted lines, which means you can offset your fabric to do 1/4 or 3/4 distances using these same slots. So you just offset your fabric from the beginning and then work the math across to know what size to cut. Now, today we're going to do a couple of quick demos. We're going to do some 1.5 inch strips, and then we'll do some 2.5 inch squares, and then we'll briefly talk about 3.5 inch strips so that you get kind of the full feeling of how this lovely ruler works. All right, let's do it. First up, let's do some 1.5 inch squares. I'm going to start with this lovely piece of blue fabric. Now, this has already been squared up quite a bit, so you'll see the effect of the squaring process more as we get into some of my other wonkier pieces of fabric. But the way to get started with the Stripology XL is just like anytime you're cutting, you're going to want to have as wide open of a surface as possible. Today I am on my Kangaroo Kookaburra cutting table. It is a beautiful table with a custom made mat, so my entire surface is a cutting table. All right, and I'm going to take my fabric and I'm going to fold to selvage. And I tend to put my fold kind of right at the edge of the selvage itself. So kind of all my usable fabric is here on this side. And if you were to have any fabric that has come off the bolt wonky, so not just that the selvages are uneven, but they're actually cattywampus from each other, then you would want to iron all that fabric out and fold it so that it is actually square. All right, so now we have a nice straight edge here and a nice straight edge here. I like to go ahead and line this up on my mat, but that is much less important than lining it up on our ruler. All right, from there, we're going to take our ruler, and we always want to line our fabric up just beyond 0, unless we're trying to intentionally offset our fabric. In that case, we would want to square our fabric to 0 and then slide just the ruler over, all right, so that we know we have a nice straight edge that we're lining up with. And we want to make sure that our fabric is above the teardrop where we put our rotary cutter in, so that we're going to get clean cuts from the bottom all the way up, like so. And we want to make sure that it is parallel with a line up here as well. Now, I've gotten a little cattywampus from my mat, and I find that to be a bit of a mind bender, so I like it to be square with all of the things, okay? So I'm beyond my 0 line, I am square at the top and bottom, and now I'm ready to cut. Now remember, the magic here is in not having to move anything in order to make a whole bunch of cuts so that everything ends up very crisp. So hold firmly right on the side here and release your rotary blade. Insert your rotary blade down here at that teardrop. And with firm, even pressure, go all the way up to the top teardrop. Even if your fabric doesn't quite go all that way, okay? Remember on these, we're gonna cut 1.5 inch gaps. So I'm gonna cut at every star along the bottom of my Stripology XL ruler. So there's the first star on my Stripology XL ruler at the 1.5. There is the second star of my Stripology XL ruler on the 3. And then the next one is at 4.5. And I had a little bit of sliding with that one because I didn't quite keep my hand firm, and my last one is at 6. And just like that, we can see, I can pull my little bits off from the edges, and we can see I was able to make 4 beautiful 1.5 inch cuts. And I didn't have to do that funky math in my head. I didn't have to slide the ruler, and so I'm not dragging my fabric back and forth, making those fabrics not be square anymore. All right? Next, let's talk about 2.5 inch squares. So we'll set these off to the side along with my funky little bits. And let's take this one out. This is a lovely piece of fabric because it is much less square than that last one. So we're gonna really benefit from being able to square this up. You might want to hit something that's this heavily creased with a hot iron. We're gonna forego it for the sake of time at the moment. But notice how I am, cut from. Yeah, that's a real weird piece right there. All right, so I'm looking at my warp and weft. And we're folding, yeah, straight up. But it is very wonky over here. So when we lay this over, we really want to make sure we're beyond that 0. So we're gonna trim all that extra off. And this time we're gonna cut it the squares. So our first square on our Stripology XL ruler is at the 0. Our second square on our Stripology XL ruler is, of course, at 2.5. Then at 5. And then I don't know that my fabric quite reaches to the 7.5. So those are gonna come out a little bit scant. We'll omit those from the illustration, all right? So I just cut a couple of strips here, but you can see how you could just as quickly go all the way across, 2.5, 5, 7.5, 10, 12.5, all the way down to 20. So you have big, long piece of yardage. We've just cut a whole bunch of strips. Then, ideally, you are gonna move your ruler and not your fabric at this point, okay? And you don't ever wanna be cutting towards your body. So we're gonna cut sideways, all right? And here's my 0. So I'm gonna cut at my 0, put my rotary cutter in my teardrop up here, cut down my 0. My next square, and because I'm cutting right to left on this, and my square is opposite, I could actually take tape and mark these. We will omit, I'll just run my finger up it so I can see where I'm supposed to be for the time being. Down here at 7.5. And then finally at 10. Always make sure your fingers are out of the way of that rotary cutter, but you do want to hold your slats kind of firmly in place as you go. Again, lift the ruler with both hands, oochie scooch it out of the way. And just like that, we've got a whole beautiful pile of 2.5 inch squares. We didn't have to do a whole bunch of finagling of moving strips around, etc. Now, I did this right in the middle of the table. If you do this over on a corner, then you can literally just step your way around the edge, and it becomes a lot easier to rotate that ruler and keep cutting. But, for the sake of the camera. So 2.5 inch squares. So we've real quickly, with our star markings on our Stripology XL ruler, we've done 1.5 inch strips. Using our squares on our Stripology XL rulers, we did 2.5 inch squares. Now, let's talk about doing 3.5 inch strips. I'm gonna use a little bit of painter's tape for this. You could use washi tape, anything that's gonna come off easily, okay? Because 3.5 inches is not a marking that is pre-marked here on my Stripology XL ruler. But I'm about to make a quilt, needs a whole bunch of 3.5 inch strips. So I'm gonna go along, and at 3.5, I'm gonna put a piece of blue tape. And then at 7, I'm gonna put a piece of blue tape. And then at 10.5, I'm gonna put a piece of blue tape. And then at 13, I'm gonna put a piece of blue tape. 1, 2, yep. Don't be afraid to count yourself out loud if you're unsure, right? And then at 16.5, we're gonna put a piece of blue tape, and I think that's probably gonna be plenty. But I now know these are where my 3.5 inch markings are. I'm off by 1. Hold on. 3.5, 7, 1, 2. Nope, that's correct. 3, 10.5, 1, 2. Yep, we got offset. I'm like, hold on, my math doesn't math. 1, 2, 3. No, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5. No, that's correct. I don't trust myself. 14. There we go. 15, 16, 17.5. There we go. All right. I'm like, do they look even now? We've marked them all now. So do that, and notice, it took me a second, right? Because 3.5 inch strips are hard to math. And that's why we need a Stripology XL ruler, because we can do that math one time and we can check our work before we cut our fabric, right? I could look at that and go, that spacing doesn't look right. Let me double check myself, rather than guessing as I'm moving a ruler along my fabric and realizing too late, like, that one was only 2.5 inches wide, right? And then we lose fabric. So we now have our ruler already and marked. Let's take our piece of yardage. Same thing. We got a wonky one here. And we want to fold it up. This is what happens when I pull samples out of the scrap bin. So our top and bottom edges are parallel and our fabric is on grain, okay? So that means that the warp and weft threads are going nice and perpendicular to one another. And we line our ruler up so our fabric edge is past the 0, and we are running parallel to these lines up here at the top and bottom, which my fabric is not. There. Take your time and get this right. It matters. All right. And then we follow the exact same procedure as before. We're just going to cut at our blue tape marks. All right. So we start at 0, square off our edge. And then we cut on our Stripology XL ruler at each of our 3.5 inch tape markings. Just like that, we have a beautiful set of strips at a funky, hard to math size, ready to rock and roll. So hopefully today's tutorial has helped you understand and maybe even fall in love with the Creative Grid Stripology XL ruler, your perfect tool for accurate cutting for strips, squares, rectangles, and more to make all of your quilting life easier. A few patterns that I recommend if you are considering the Stripology XL are my very own Lanterns of Hope pattern or my Polaris pattern. Both of these, like many traditional and modern traditional quilts, have lots of repeating strip, square, and rectangle sizes that are really easy for your Stripology XL ruler. I also really love Brittany from Lo and Behold Stitchery's Rhythm Quilt, and then Katie from Zonco, her middle sister and Grid View quilts. These also have lots of repeating shapes that are ideal practice for your Stripology XL ruler. Happy quilting, Rockstar! I'll see you soon.